You knew his face from 50 Western classics. The hero who always saved the day.
Don't you lads try anything. You might get me, but first I'll blast him right in the belly.
But Randolph Scott's private life raised eyebrows across Hollywood. His strange marriage to an Eyes who lived states away, his beach home shared with another famous actor. When death finally claimed him, family members discovered something that brought them to their knees. This simple cowboy had secretly built wealth so enormous it changed their lives forever. The man who rarely smiled on screen had the last laugh after all. Randolph Scott was born on January 23, 1898 in Orange County, Virginia, but this wasn't his family's home. It happened while they were visiting relatives. Every one of his 5 siblings was born in Charlotte, North Carolina. He was the only one who wasn't. His father, George Grant Scott, worked as an engineer in textiles, but he also became the very first certified public accountant in North Carolina. That made him a pioneer. His mother Lucille came from a wealthy and respected North Carolina family, so Randolph was born into both brains and money. His family had Scottish roots and a high place in Southern society. This gave him a strong head start in life. He grew up in Charlotte in a big elegant home that still stands today. In 1927, they moved into a grand house designed by a famous architect, Lizzie Asbury. That was the kind of life Randolph knew: private schools, well-connected friends, and the calm confidence of someone who never had to worry about money. He went to Woodbury Forest School in Virginia. It wasn't just a school, it was a place where the sons of rich families became Southern leaders. That school shaped him. It taught him poise, charm, and the belief that he could do anything. But Randolph wasn't just a polished young man, he was athletic too. He played football and baseball, he swam competitively and raced horses. These weren't just hobbies, they were serious, expensive sports. He played football at Georgia Tech and dreamed of becoming an All-American, but a major back injury ended that dream. He then transferred to the University of North Carolina to study textile engineering, following his father's path. What's strange is that the same sports, especially riding, later made him perfect for Western films. He didn't need to act like he could ride a horse, he already could. That gave him a natural screen presence. Randolph was also shaped by old Southern values. He took part in plays organized by the United Daughters of the Confederacy. These weren't ordinary plays. They celebrated Southern pride and were full of themes like honor, loss, and sacrifice. Through those performances, he developed a soft aristocratic Southern accent that became part of his on-screen charm. The culture he was raised in taught him to be stoic, proud, and proper. That's exactly the kind of man people later saw in his films. His family's money didn't just help, it changed his entire path. While many Southern boys were struggling to find jobs during World War I, Randolph had a safety net. After returning from the war, he didn't have to scramble. His father was so connected that he got him a letter of introduction to Howard Hughes, the Howard Hughes. Randolph used that letter in 1928 to enter Hollywood. He didn't have to start from the bottom. He arrived with confidence, good looks, and powerful friends. That's a combination few could match. When the United States joined World War I in April 1917, Randolph was just 19. Instead of staying home, he enlisted in the National Guard that July. Most men who joined the war effort were older, but he didn't wait. By October, he was promoted to corporal. By February 1918, he was a sergeant. His father tried to get him into West Point, but Randolph wanted to serve. That choice showed his discipline, and it matched the brave characters he'd play later in film. In France, he served on the front lines. He was part of a 2-man team in the 2nd Trench Mortar Battalion. His job was dangerous. He sat in small shelters directing artillery fire while under enemy attack. He and his partner read pocket testaments and clutched their dog tags before every mission. He never spoke publicly about what he saw there. His work was exact. Using hand-calculated math, he sent updates to aim the artillery correctly. If he got it wrong, men could die. That kind of pressure left a mark on him and helped build the quiet, hardened strength people saw in his roles. His military training also gave him a set of real-world skills that Hollywood couldn't fake. He learned to ride horses through rough terrain. He trained with guns and bayonets. These weren't props, they were survival tools. So later, when Randolph played cowboys and soldiers, it felt real, because it was. He wasn't just acting like a hero, he had lived it. After the war ended in November 1918, Randolph didn't rush home, he stayed in France and went to the artillery officer candidate school. Ensure he became a second lieutenant by May 1919. When he finally returned to the United States, he went to Georgia Tech to chase a new dream, becoming a top football player. He joined a fraternity and threw himself into sports again, but his old injury came back. That dream ended too, so he moved again, this time to the University of North Carolina to study engineering. It didn't last. The classroom couldn't match the excitement of the battlefield or the football field. He left college and joined his father's textile firm. In that firm, he worked hard. He was an accountant, then an auditor, then an office manager. He was focused and responsible, but that life didn't excite him. It wasn't enough. So in 1927, he took a risk. He left behind a steady career for something wildly uncertain. In 1929, while playing at the Los Angeles Country Club, something unexpected happened. He got paired with Howard Hughes. Yes, that Howard Hughes, the rich eccentric man who made movies and flew planes. Scott had no idea this round of golf would change everything. Hughes noticed Scott's tall build, good looks, and southern charm. Hollywood needed guys like him. By the end of the game, Hughes offered him a small uncredited role in the far call. It wasn't much, just a tiny part in a movie, but it was a start. If Scott had skipped golf that day, he might never have stepped into the world of films. After that lucky break, Scott realized looks weren't enough, he needed skill. So he enrolled at the Pasadena Community Playhouse. It was the top acting school on the West Coast, where future stars like Gene Hackman and Dustin Hoffman also trained. Scott worked hard. He studied voice, movement, and stage acting. In 1931, legendary director Cecil B. DeMille came to watch a play. He saw Scott and was impressed. He told someone, "That young man has something Hollywood can't teach." That moment opened doors for Scott. He wasn't just a lucky golfer anymore, he was becoming a real actor. That same year, something unusual happened behind the scenes of the Western film The Virginian. Gary Cooper, the star, needed help with a Virginia accent. Who better to teach him than a real Virginian? Scott stepped in to coach Cooper. He wasn't the lead actor, he wasn't even credited, but he made Cooper sound more authentic, and critics noticed. That film made Cooper a bigger star while Scott stayed in the background. Still, it built a lasting friendship between the two men, and it showed just how generous and professional Scott really was. In 1932, things picked up. Scott signed a contract with Paramount Pictures. That was a big deal back then. His first major film was Hot Saturday, where he worked alongside Nancy Carroll and a young Cary Grant. The film made waves for its bold story, but something else happened behind the scenes. Scott and Grant became close friends. They even lived together in a Malibu beach house for over 10 years. People gossiped, speculated, and wrote about them in magazines. But the truth was simple: they had a deep, lasting bond, rare in Hollywood. During this time, Scott's roles kept growing. He was no longer just in the background. His southern charm and handsome face helped, of course. He was 6 feet 2 inches with a calm, confident presence that audiences liked. By 1934, he was landing bigger parts. He often played loyal friends or romantic rivals, but always brought a unique presence to the screen. Randolph Scott's first marriage looked perfect on paper. He married Marion DuPont Somerville on March 23, 1936. She was a wealthy heir, granddaughter of the founder of the DuPont chemical empire. He was 38, she was 41. She was a queen in the world of horse racing. He was rising fast in Hollywood. Their wedding was so private it didn't even hit the news until months later. Scott had actually been best man at Marion's first wedding, which made their own marriage feel like the next chapter of a long friendship. But behind the glamour, things didn't click. Marion stayed in Virginia at her 55-room Montpelier estate, once home to President James Madison. Scott worked non-stop in Los Angeles. She built a gym for him in her basement, but he was so tall, 6 feet 4 inches, they had to dig a pit in the floor just so he could stand up straight during workouts. They weren't seen together much. Marion didn't like Hollywood. In 1938, her horse Battleship made history by becoming the first American-bred winner of England's Grand National Steeplechase. She couldn't go to the celebration in New York. Scott went in her place. After 3 years of this long-distance marriage, they separated in 1939. No fights, no scandal, just 2 lives heading in different directions. They had no kids, but Marion kept the Scott name until she died in 1983, a quiet sign of respect that never faded. A year before that marriage ended, in 1935, Scott moved in with Cary Grant. Their house in Malibu was big, 5,530 square feet, and beautiful. People called it Bachelor Hall. They were young, rich, good-looking, and always photographed playing golf or lounging by the beach. The studios even staged photos of them working out together. The tabloids couldn't get enough. Gossip columnist Hedda Hopper joked about them. Actress Carole Lombard teased that Scott paid the bills while Grant mailed them. Their closeness made people talk, especially since Grant briefly got married and still returned to live with Scott after his divorce. They lived together for 12 years. Some said they were just best friends, others whispered it was more than that. We'll never know for sure. But in 1944, under pressure from studios, they ended their shared living arrangement and married women. Still, they stayed friends for life. Hollywood rarely saw bonds like that. Back in the late 1930s and early 1940s, Scott wasn't just doing westerns, he was in everything. In 1936, he appeared in a musical with Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers, a comedy with Mae West, and played Hawkeye in The Last of the Mohicans. He was considered for the role of Ashley Wilkes in Gone with the Wind but lost out to Leslie Howard. He starred in Roberta, Pittsburgh, and even Rebecca of Sunnybrook Farm. Critics loved how he moved between genres, charming one moment, intense the next. He wasn't just another cowboy, not yet. Those years shaped him. They helped him find his range and build a strong fan base. By the early 1940s, he wasn't switching genres anymore. Westerns became his home, and he wore the cowboy hat like he was born with it. Directors loved him. Michael Curtiz once said, "Scott was the only gentleman I've met in this business." That meant something in an industry full of divas. Early on, Cecil B. DeMille sent him to train at Pasadena Playhouse before giving him big roles. He listened, learned, and never made trouble. He worked with greats like George B. Seitz, The Last of the Mohicans, and Henry King, Jesse James. They respected his discipline. He was always on time, prepared, and professional. Behind the scenes, he lived up to his Southern gentleman image. 2 roles changed everything. In 1936, The Last of the Mohicans showed he could lead an adventure film. At just 92 minutes, it was tight, fast, and full of action. Scott's Hawkeye was a hero with heart. Then came Jesse James in 1939. Scott played Will Wright alongside Tyrone Power and Henry Fonda. The film made over $2.3 million in the United States and Canada. Only Gone with the Wind and Mr. Smith Goes to Washington did better that year. One scene involving a horse caused such a stir, it pushed Hollywood to protect animals on set. That's how big the film was. By the time America entered World War II, Scott wanted to serve. He tried to join the Marines but was turned down due to a back injury. Still, he didn't just sit it out. He toured military bases with comedian Joe DeRita, performing for troops. On his own ranch, he grew food for the government. On screen, he kept spirits high with war movies like To the Shores of Tripoli, Bombardier, Corvette K-225, and Gung Ho. These films weren't just entertainment, they were a morale boost. Scott became a symbol of American strength, both real and imagined. In 1944, he married Patricia Stillman. That marriage lasted until he died in 1987, over 40 years. They adopted 2 kids, Christopher and Sandra. While other Hollywood couples burned bright and fast, Scott's family life stayed solid and private. It gave him peace that many stars never found. He also knew how to handle business. In the late 1940s, he partnered with producer Harry Joe Brown to start Renown Productions. The name combined theirs, Randolph and Brown. Back then, most actors had no control. Studios made all the calls. But with Renown, Scott picked his own projects, mainly westerns. He got creative control and better pay. This move shaped his final film years. In 1946, Badman's Territory hit theaters. Scott played Mark Rowley, a lawman dealing with outlaws like Jesse James and the Dalton Gang. The film made $557,000 in profit. That was big money. Audiences loved it. It got 2 sequels and made Scott a guaranteed box office draw. Randolph Scott didn't become a Hollywood legend overnight. But between 1950 and 1953, something incredible happened. He broke into the top 10 list of America's most popular male stars and stayed there for 4 straight years. That was rare for any actor, but especially for someone making westerns, a genre that didn't usually dominate the box office. Even more surprising, Scott was already in his 50s, yet his movies made money, a lot of it. By 1950, he was earning $100,000 per film, about $1.3 million today. Families across the country, from the cities to the countryside, lined up to see his quiet, powerful brand of justice. His fans included wide-eyed kids, tough ranchers, and everyone in between. He became more than a star, he became a symbol. But that rise wasn't just about numbers. It was about the stories he told and the way he told them. In Trail Street from 1947, he played Bat Masterson, a no-nonsense lawman sent to clean up a wild Kansas town. The movie wasn't just action-packed, it had energy, life, and earned a tidy profit of $365,000. That same year, in Gunfighters, Scott was a broken man trying to leave his violent past behind after killing his best friend. The pain he showed was real, quiet, and powerful. By 1949, he took things even further in The Walking Hills, a dusty, gritty treasure hunt in the desert. That film mixed Western grit with film noir mystery, and Scott stood tall in the middle of it all, calm, steady, and deeply human. As his roles grew deeper, so did his look. By the late 40s, Scott's face had changed. It was tougher, sharper, marked by wind and sun from shooting on location. But instead of hiding his age, he leaned into it. His leathery skin and cold stare made him feel more real. You believed this man had seen things, hard things. His face told stories even when he didn't speak. That weathered look reminded people of old legends like William S. Hart, and it made Scott stand out even more. He didn't need flashy lines or big moments. A single glance from him could carry the weight of a whole scene. Then came the most important stretch of his career. From 1956 to 1960, Scott and Boetticher made 7 westerns together. These weren't big-budget epics. They were lean, tight, and loaded with meaning. Each one peeled back a layer of the Western hero, showing his pain, his regrets, and his loneliness. The films 7 Men From Now, The Tall T, Decision at Sundown, Buchanan Rides Alone, Westbound, Ride Lonesome, and Comanche Station are now called the Renown Cycle. They stripped away the old cliches and showed the Western for what it really was, a lonely, dangerous world where doing the right thing came at a cost. In 7 Men From Now, Scott played a man haunted by guilt. His wife had been killed in a robbery. He blamed himself because he refused lesser work out of pride, forcing her to take the job that led to her death. Every step he took, every man he faced, was driven by that pain. Lee Marvin played his rival, a charming killer who reflected the darker parts of Scott's own soul. Their clash wasn't just physical, it was personal. The movie didn't end with a victory. It ended with a man still carrying his burden, knowing revenge couldn't bring peace. 1 year later, The Tall T went even deeper. Scott's character, Pat Brennan, tried to trade candy with a bull in one scene, and somehow that small moment said it all. He wasn't a brute, he was a thinker, a man who chose patience and wit over raw power. The story threw him into a hostage situation with ruthless killers and an innocent woman. But the danger wasn't just the guns, it was the choices. Could he save her? Could he trust his enemies? Could he walk away? Every decision cut deep, and the tension never let go. That's why the film is now part of the National Film Registry. By 1959, in Ride Lonesome, Scott took on one of his most painful roles. He played a bounty hunter named Ben Brigade, but he didn't want the reward. He wanted justice, his kind of justice. Years before, his wife had been kidnapped and killed. The man who did it was still out there. So Brigade captured the killer's brother, not for money, but as bait. The final scene, where he burns the tree his wife was hanged from, says everything. That fire wasn't just the end of a chase, it was the start of healing. Silent. Powerful. Unforgettable. Then came Comanche Station in 1960, Scott's last Western before retiring. It was the perfect farewell. He played Jefferson Cody, a man who had spent 10 years searching for his wife, who had been taken by the Comanches. In rescuing another woman, he thought maybe, just maybe, he'd find her. But she wasn't the one. Still, he kept his promise and took her home, protecting her from dangerous men along the way. When it was over, he rode off alone, still searching, still hoping. That was Scott's final message: heroes don't always win, sometimes they just keep going. In 1962, Ride the High Country was just another small-budget Western. The director, Sam Peckinpah, wasn't a big name yet. He was young, stubborn, and full of ideas the studio didn't care for. From day one, trouble followed the production. MGM had planned to shoot in the scenic Mammoth Lakes, but the weather wouldn't cooperate, so the studio ordered everything to move hundreds of miles away to Bronson Canyon in Los Angeles. That shift was a disaster. Peckinpah, angry at the decision, made sure the cast and crew stayed drunk for the 6-hour bus ride back to LA. The chaos didn't stop there. When MGM's president, Joseph Vogel, watched an early cut of the film, he fell asleep. When he woke up, he called it the worst movie he had ever seen. MGM didn't even give the film a fair shot. They shoved it onto the bottom half of double features in the United States. It flopped hard. But Europe saw something different. Overseas, Ride the High Country quietly became one of MGM's biggest hits, and slowly the film's reputation began to grow. In 1992, it was selected for preservation in the National Film Registry. What started as a troubled production ended up becoming a classic. At the heart of it all was Randolph Scott. He played Gil Westrom, an aging ex-lawman struggling to keep up with the changing world. The story takes place around 1905, when the Old West was fading fast. Scott's face, weathered, serious, and honest, fit the role perfectly. His character was torn between gold and loyalty, greed and honor. Behind the camera, Scott and his co-star, Joel McCrea, were facing their own twilight. They were real-life legends playing men out of time, and it gave the film a quiet power. The cinematography added even more. Lucian Ballard's soft, autumn-colored shots made the whole movie feel like a goodbye, not just to the frontier but to the old Hollywood Western itself. This was no ordinary cowboy film, it had soul. And Scott gave one of the most emotional performances of his career, maybe the most emotional, maybe the best. Scott thought so too. After the film, he walked away from acting forever. He didn't want to keep going just to take weaker roles or become a fading star. He had said what he wanted to say through Gil Westrom. That one performance had everything: doubt, pride, regret, and redemption. Scott told friends he could never top it. So he didn't try. He left on his own terms. But Scott wasn't just smart on screen, he was even smarter off it. When he retired in 1962, he didn't fade away. He focused on business, and he played that game better than almost anyone in Hollywood. By the mid-60s, his fortune had reached $100 million. That would be almost $280 million today. Most actors didn't think like that, but Scott did. He bought early, held on, and watched the numbers climb. He didn't just own a mansion or two, he owned land, lots of it, especially in San Fernando and Palm Springs. Just those properties alone were worth over $100 million by 1965. Palm Springs became a hot spot, and San Fernando exploded with growth. Scott saw it coming before anyone else. He didn't stop there. In 1927, he helped create the Park Ridge Country Club in Corona, California. That course later became Cresta Verde, a favorite spot for stars like Lucille Ball, Burt Lancaster, and Clark Gable. Scott loved golf, but this was also business. It became one of the oldest courses in the United States, and it still draws people today. He managed to mix personal passion with profit in a way few could. When Randolph Scott died in 1987, he left behind more than just a film legacy. His fortune was still worth around $100 million. Even adjusted for inflation, he had done better than most. Cary Grant's estate, by comparison, was worth around $130 million today. Katharine Hepburn's, around $30 million. Scott's numbers were in a league of their own. But in his final years, the strong cowboy started to fade. He had heart problems and struggled with his breathing. Pneumonia sent him to the hospital more than once. By 1987, he was weak and needed full-time care. On March 2nd, he died quietly in his sleep at home in Beverly Hills. He was 89. Just 2 months earlier, his friend Cary Grant had passed away. At Scott's funeral, only 25 family members attended. It was held near his boyhood home in Charlotte, North Carolina. Reverend Billy Graham led the service. President Ronald Reagan sent a telegram calling Scott one of Hollywood's finest talents.